Today we're going to make roast chicken bone broth in the 8-quart Instant Pot, and we're going to see exactly how gelatinous this is going to come out. Hi sweet friends, I'm Mary and welcome to Mary's Nest, where I teach traditional cooking skills for making nutrient-dense foods like bone broth, sourdough, ferments, and more. So if you enjoy learning about those things, consider subscribing to my channel. And don't forget to click on the little notification bell below. That'll let you know every time I upload a new video. Well, for those of you who have been with me for a while, you know I love to make bone broth in the slow cooker. And before I started making it in the slow cooker, I was making it on the stovetop for years. And I love the slow cooker because I can leave it unattended, I don't need to worry about it, and it makes a beautifully gelatinous bone broth. And you all know how important that is to me. But I have been hearing from a lot of you how you really enjoy making bone broth in the Instant Pot. And for this past Mother's Day, my husband surprised me with this wonderful 8-quart Instant Pot. So we're going to give it a try. Now normally, when I make roast chicken bone broth in the slow cooker, I use the carcass of 3 chickens, and then I add in what I like to call my insurance policy, 6 chicken feet, because we got the carcass of 3 chickens, so that means 6 feet. Now today, when I make roast chicken bone broth in the Instant Pot, I'm going to do this a little differently than the way I make it in the slow cooker. And the reason is because I discovered, I'm learning here, that, and you'll see this is wet because I had filled it with water, there's a mark that you can only fill it to a certain extent. You can only basically fill it 2/3 full. Even though it's an 8-quart Instant Pot, you can only fill it 2/3 full if you use the pressure cooker option. And so what I did was I measured how many cups of liquid I could get in there, or quarts, and it's basically around 5.5 quarts. So, and also too, when I looked at it, it just really didn't look that big to me. And so, as compared to the slow cooker. So I said, well, I'm not going to try to mash 3 chicken carcass in here along with the vegetables and the water and all of that. So instead of the 3, I've just got 2 chicken carcass here and 4 feet. And the feet are my insurance policy. Don't worry if you don't have chicken feet. You can do this without that. So what I've got here are just the 2 carcass and the 4 feet, and this is just from chickens that I've roasted, and after we've eaten it and pulled off the meat that we want and so on and so forth, I just save the bones and the skin in my freezer, and then when I get 2 chickens worth or 3 chickens if I'm doing it in a slow cooker, then I say, okay, I'm ready to make bone broth. And also, since this was kind of small in comparison to what I'm used to working with my slow cooker, I'm also going a little light on the vegetables too, because I want to make sure that I have enough room in here. So I've got 1 onion and all the onion skin too, you know, when we make bone broth. It's nothing fancy. Throw in the skin, it adds color, nutrition, flavor, everything. And I've got about 2 carrots here, just chopped up, and often I use the vegetables that are looking a little past their prime. They're perfect for when you make bone broth. And then I've just got the bottom of the celery cut, and I've just quartered it, and then I've got my usual bay leaf. You know me, every time I make bone broth, I always add a bay leaf, and then just a bunch of peppercorns. And that's it. This is going to be your basic roast chicken bone broth. We're not going to do anything fancy, because the big reason we want to do this is to see, does it come as gelatinous as what we can get out of the slow cooker? Folks have said that they've gotten it gelatinous, but when they look at the video where I made it in the slow cooker and the bone broth is so gelatinous like Jell-O, they've told me that theirs isn't quite like that. But I called the manufacturer and I talked to them about making bone broth in here. And they said definitely put it on the low pressure setting. Now that is going to be over 180 degrees Fahrenheit, but let's see what happens. And the reason I mention that 180 degrees Fahrenheit is that's generally the best temperature to simmer bone broth at, to extract all the collagen from the bones and make the bone broth nice and gelatinous. Now, can it go slightly higher? Possibly. I think the gelatin may not be as firm as if the bone broth is simmered for the entire time at 180 degrees. But I think maybe it will still be a little gelatinous. At least that's what I've heard from all of you who have been making it in the Instant Pot. So I'm going to be very curious to see exactly how it comes out. And one other thing I want to say is, you might be saying, well, why would it be different in the Instant Pot? Maybe the Instant Pot is at 180 degrees Fahrenheit. And actually, on low pressure, it averages around 230 degrees Fahrenheit. And so that's why it'll be interesting to see, can the gelatin kind of hold its own, so to speak, or the collagen kind of hold its own? And in the end, since it'll only be under pressure for 2 hours, it held at that temperature of about 230 degrees Fahrenheit. Can it withstand it? And can it come gelatinous? So we're going to find out. Now I'm going to go ahead and add everything in to the Instant Pot, my carcass and my feet. And I just wanted to say, whenever you make roast chicken, save everything. Save the carcass, save the skin, save any little bits that you don't eat, and save all the pan drippings. And then put everything into some kind of container and just throw it into your freezer. And whenever you think you have enough bones, make bone broth. I often say, chicken bone broth, it costs pennies a jar because you're really just using a bunch of scraps. And it's delicious. And if you can find chicken feet, definitely buy them and include them, because they are loaded with collagen and they really help to make chicken bone broth gelatinous. And you can usually find them sometimes at your grocery store, sometimes at your farmer's market, and you can also order them from U.S. Wellness Meats, the place I've mentioned in the past to you where I buy my beef bones from. They sell all kinds of meats, they sell chickens, they sell chicken feet, and don't forget to check the description below underneath this video, because the people at U.S. Wellness Meats are so sweet, and they gave me a promo code, a discount code for 15% off regularly priced items for my viewers. So be sure to check that out if you ever want to order anything from them. Alrighty, well, I'm going to get all the little last bits of this in, and then we'll go ahead and add in the veggies. Now I'm going to put in the carrots and the celery and the onions here. Now I don't add any extra salt when I make chicken bone broth, because having been a roast chicken, there's already some salt on it. But even when I make beef bone broth, I don't add any salt at all, because for the most part, I like to be able to season my bone broths after they're cooked. But in the case of, we're just using the roast chicken carcass here, so there's already got a little salt on it, so it's going to have a pretty nice flavoring. You could just drink it straight. You probably won't need to add any sea salt to it. With the beef bone broth, when we drink that, I generally do add a little sea salt to that, because that really helps with the flavor. So I'm just going to dump these peppercorns in and the bay leaves. And now some of you have asked me, well, what do you do with all this bone broth? And generally, my husband and I drink the beef bone broth straight. We just drink it with breakfast, add a little sea salt, warm it up. And that's the other thing I want to mention. We do warm it up. People ask me, do we take it in the gelatinous state? I just warm it gently on the stove and add a little sea salt, and we enjoy it in a coffee cup. It's wonderful. Chicken bone broth, I generally use in recipe preparation. I use it as a base for soups. I use it as a base for making gravies. I use it in place of water when making rice or other grains and things like that. So that's sort of my modus operandi, so to speak, when it comes to beef bone broth and chicken bone broth. Well, this is filled with the 2 chickens, the feet, and the vegetables. This altogether is reaching, in terms of the solids, the halfway mark that's marked in this slow cooker. And our slow cooker, and that's what I'm used to, in the Instant Pot. And so that's halfway, which I think is a good amount. I don't think that I would fill it with the solids up to the 2/3 line. I think that's a good place, obviously, for your liquid measure. But for the solids, I think just going halfway up is a good idea. So I'm glad that in this 8 quart, I've got 2 chickens, 4 feet, and then just a few of the vegetables. Now, whenever we make any kind of bone broth, we want to add some acid to it. And the reason we add the acid is because that's going to leach all the collagen out of the bones, and in this case, out of the chicken bones. Now, when I make chicken bone broth, I like to use white vermouth, but you can certainly use apple cider vinegar. I'm just not a fan of it, but when I do use white vermouth, which is a fortified wine, you can also use white wine if you want, just regular white wine, but I like the fortified wines because they're the ones that come with a screw top and you can just keep in your pantry for cooking. versus a regular wine that you'd uncork, and it may over time, if it's not being drank, it'll take on somewhat of a vinegary flavor. So the fortified wines are lovely to keep on hand for cooking. And so the white vermouth, which is a fortified wine, I like to use for making chicken bone broth. Now, I've got about a cup here. Now, if you use apple cider vinegar, I recommend only going with about 1/4 of a cup because it can have a strong flavor, and 1/4 of a cup should be sufficient to leach out, to acidulate the water enough to leach out the collagen from the bones and make your bone broth gelatinous. So here I'm just going to go ahead and add in that white vermouth. And then the next thing that we're going to do is use water basically to cover. And what I'm going to do is just go up to the pressure cooker 2/3 mark. That should have everything well submerged. And I think we're going to be in good shape. Now, a little secret when it comes to making bone broth, any type of bone broth, you never want to add too much water. Now, I have actually stopped before the 2/3 mark, and the reason is with the 2 carcass and the 4 feet and the veggies that I've added, and the water that I added, I just wanted to add enough water to cover. You don't want to add too much water, so I'm just slightly below the pressure cooker 2/3 full max. And I think that's smart to do because I don't want to take any chance and add, because this was enough water to cover everything. And I don't want to add too much water and risk this being not gelatinous. Since we're already experimenting with the pressure cooker, I want to give it as much help as I can to make it come as gelatinous as possible by adding the chicken feet and adding just enough water to cover. Well, I let this soak for 1 hour in the acidulated water, the water that I've added with the white vermouth. And the reason that I do that is because I like to give the bones a little head start. This is what I call another one of my insurance policies, insurance policy number 2. The feet are number 1 and the soaking for 1 hour is number 2. And the reason I do that is because I want to allow the acidulated water to start leaching the collagen out of the bones, to give it a little 1 hour head start before I actually heat it up. Now, you can skip this step if you want, but I really like to do this. I do this whether I make bone broth on the stovetop, in the slow cooker, or now in the Instant Pot. I just let it soak, let that acidulated water leach out some of the collagen to give it a head start in hopes of creating the most gelatinous bone broth as possible. Now I'm going to get ready to put the lid on, and for those of you who may be new to the Instant Pot, this little valve up here has 2 settings. One says venting and one says sealing. We're going to want to keep that on the sealing for the pressure cooking, meaning that it seals everything in, and that's for the pressure cooker option. So let me just put this lid on. I was making a little song. And then we'll lock it in place, makes another little song, and then we'll make sure that vent is on sealing. And I just want to mention one thing about this if you are new to an Instant Pot and you're experimenting with it. I thought that this vent and sealing thing would really be like really clicking and locking into place. It really doesn't. It just kind of moves up and down. So in case you're new to it, I'll just tell you that little tip. So I've just got it turned down to sealing. Now we'll get ready to turn it on to the amount of time we want. Now this Instant Pot has a soup broth option. So I'm going to press that option, soup broth, and I'll take a close-up picture so you can see. And then you've got to do bone broth for 2 hours. So I'm going to increase the time up to 2 hours. And once I've got that up to 2 hours, I'm going to also change the pressure level to low. Because when I talked to the manufacturer, they said that for bone broth, you want to do it for 2 hours on low pressure, which is approximately 230 degrees Fahrenheit. And there it goes. So that's all set, and we'll let that come up to pressure, and then it'll cook the bone broth for 2 hours. And after that, we'll come back, and I'll show you how I strain it and go through that whole process. And then we'll decant it, we'll chill a bit, and we'll see just how gelatinous this is going to come. Well, this cooked for 2 hours, and I let the pressure come down naturally because I don't like to move it from the sealing to the venting because the steam comes out very forcefully. If I want to do that, I usually have my husband do it and move it with a ruler. So I'm a little bit of a chicken, but it's vented now. I let it come down from pressure naturally. And so now we'll go ahead and open it and we'll see how this bone broth came, this chicken bone broth. Well, it looks quite good. And I'll overlay a picture so you can see exactly what it looks like. The color is very rich, beautiful golden color. So it looks, at least so far, it looks like it's come very nicely. This is still a little warm, so I'm going to use pot holders to lift this out of the Instant Pot, and I'm going to put it right down over here so we can get ready to start straining out all the solids. So what I'm going to do is just use my hand strainer here and remove all of the solids into this bowl. And I'm anxious to look to see the bones still have quite a bit of firmness to them. So I'm thinking maybe we can reuse this and make another batch of bone broth with these chicken bones. I want to see how, look at the feet. The feet are actually fairly quite intact. It's still quite hot, so I can't pick it up. But there still seems to be a lot of collagen still intact in these feet. So I think I'm going to save all this and try and see if I can do another batch. Yeah, I find this very interesting that even after 2 hours of pressure, I'm quite fascinated after being under pressure for 2 hours how these feet are still very much intact. I'm thinking that this actually might come gelatinous. We shall see. Okay, I've got as much of the solids out as I can, so I'm going to move this to my back counter and we'll proceed with the next step. Now, those of you who have been with me for a while know how I like to use these flour sack towels over a strainer, over another stock pot, or in this case, I do it over a large measuring cup so you can see exactly what I'm doing. Because I like to strain my broth through this to get it really nice and clear and get out every little bit of debris that I can. But you don't have to do this if you don't want. You can certainly just transfer it at this point, once you've removed all the solids, to your refrigerator. Let the fat, in this case the chicken fat, the schmaltz, congeal on the top. And then in the morning, after it's had a chance to get nice and cool in your fridge, you can just remove that schmaltz from the top. Don't throw it out. Chicken fat is wonderful, and it's especially delicious and almost basically considered a necessary ingredient if you make chopped chicken livers. But in any event, what will happen is the fat will rise to the top and be solid. You can skim that off, and the little bits of impurities and debris and whatnot that are floating around in the warm broth now will sink to the bottom. So you can skim off the fat and then skim off your hopefully gelatinous broth and then leave that little debris on the bottom to discard. But what I like to do is go through the process now where I strain this through the cheesecloth. I meant to say strain through my flour sack towel. You can certainly use cheesecloth, but cheesecloths become a little expensive and it's only good for, a couple of tries. A lot of people will discard it after just using it once. You can rinse it out and, it may hold up for a couple of rinsings, but then it starts to really begin to disintegrate. But anyway, so this is what I like to do, and then I'll show you how the flour sack towel looks so that you can see all the debris that I'm catching. So this is the debris that I catch in my flour sack towel, and that's why I like to strain it like this. Certainly, as I said, it'll sink to the bottom, so you don't have to go through this step if you don't want, but I like to get this all out in one fell swoop and do it now. But I'll overlay a picture too so you can see this up close. Now I've still got some more broth to strain, but I just wanted to show you how there's a layer of fat, the chicken fat, that's showing right at the top here, and I'll take a close-up picture. So if you wanted, once you strained out some of the debris, you could go ahead and refrigerate this, just like this, 1, 2, 3. And you could either, if you were straining this into a stock pot or into a large glass measuring cup like this, and you could go ahead and put this in your fridge, and then in the morning you could just remove the fat if you wanted, or you could just leave that layer of fat, which would allow this broth to stay fresh in your refrigerator for about a week, because that fat makes almost like an airtight seal. However, I like to go one more step, and sometimes I do these reverse, you'll see in other videos. Sometimes I do it like this. It's really just, there's no particular order. But what I like to do at this point is I like to strain off the fat now using a fat separator. And the reason is I like to decant this either in a large jar like this, which is a half gallon, which is 8 cups. And if I'm going to make a soup in the next day or two, I'll remove that fat and I'll decant it in here without any debris and any fat. And then I have nice, beautiful chicken bone broth ready to make a nice chicken soup. If I think that I'm not going to use it quickly or anything other than the 8 cups, which is usually the amount I use when I make a soup, if I think I'm going to only use those 8 cups, or if I'm not going to use any right away, I like to store it in these glass jars. I think they're either called French working jars or French jelly jars, I forget exactly, and I'll put a link below in the description. You can find these pretty much at any of the kitchen stores and also on Amazon. They're very affordable. And usually, sometimes they come with the lid, sometimes they don't. Sometimes the lids are white. These are older. I've had these a long time. And they hold about 2 cups. So it's perfect for when you're making a recipe and you just need about 2 cups of bone broth, either to just defrost and drink and warm up and drink, or to make a soup. If I wanted all 8 cups, I'd just take out 4 of these, or just the 2 cups to make a nice chicken gravy. This is the perfect size. And I love using these to freeze. And number one, I like working with glass as opposed to plastic, but I love these little plastic lids because I usually leave, I only fill it up to about here, so I leave a good inch headspace to allow it to expand when it freezes. But just in the event that I put too much in, nothing happens. The jar doesn't break. It simply just pushes this top off. I can't remember if that's ever really happened to me, but sometimes I'll see it when it freezes. It freezes with kind of a little mountain almost in the middle. And sometimes it's like right at touching the lid. But if it were to expand even more, boop, the lid just comes off. So it's no big deal. So let me show you how I use my fat separator. This gadget is terrific, and I'll put a link to this below because I know so many of you have asked me about this when you've seen me use it in my other bone broth videos. And all I'm going to do is just pour the bone broth into here, and you will see, just like when I showed you the picture, the up-close picture of how the fat was floating at the top of this measuring cup, the fat's going to float right up to the top here. I'll take another picture and I'll overlay that so you can see. It's like a good maybe ½ inch or inch of fat that's sitting on the top there. So I took a picture, there was a lot of reflection, but hopefully you can see that there's just this layer of fat here. Now, and there's all this broth underneath. Well, this has a little lever right here, and when you press on it, it opens a little hole in the bottom of this fat separator. I love this. It's so modern compared to the old-fashioned ones where you poured, what do you call things stuck out like this, the spout, and you just kind of poured and tried to be careful, but it was never an exact science. This is perfect because all you do is drain your broth until you see the fat come down to the bottom here, and then you stop. So we'll just go ahead and we'll just drain our bone broth, our chicken bone broth. It's a beautiful color, by the way. I'm very impressed. And we just drain this right down until we see that fat is lowering, and then when the fat gets down to the bottom there, we'll just stop. Almost there. Perfect. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to get another container and I'm going to drain that schmaltz, the chicken fat, into that container so I can save that in my fridge. And now I'll just go ahead and drain that fat right into this container. So I'll go ahead and continue to do this until I get this jar filled. Well, this is wonderful. I've got a ½ gallon here, which is 8 cups. I've got a 2-cup measure here and a 1-cup measure here. Now, I'm going to take a little bit of this and I'm going to transfer some to a small cup. I'm going to put it in my refrigerator. We're going to let it chill down and we're going to see how well it gelled. Well, I've got that little bit of broth chilling in the refrigerator so we can see how well it gels. And I'm just going to take a taste of this. Let's see how this chicken bone broth came in the Instant Pot. not bad. It's pretty good. It's interesting. The color is very rich, but I do find that the chicken bone broth that I make in my slow cooker has a little bit of a richer flavor. This is like a lighter flavor. It's not bad by any stretch of the imagination. It's just not as strong, not as intense as what I get from the slow cooker. But it's quite lovely, and I think it'll definitely work beautifully for making soups or gravies, really anything, even drinking it in a mug. I think that I might add, even though I use the carcass from roast chickens that had been salted and whatnot, I think I would add a touch of sea salt if I drank this as a beverage, a hot beverage out of a mug, the way I do with the beef bone broth. Then I think it'd be perfect. Well, this actually has a bit of a gel to it. Now, it is more of a looser gel. It's not as like Jello-like as the, I'm gonna just get the plate here, as the bone broth, the chicken bone broth that I get out of the slow cooker. So it's got quite a bit of jiggle to it, and it's quite cold. I had it in the refrigerator for a good while. But it's not bad. It does have some gel to it. And all things considered, a pretty good gel. It's got a nice jiggle. I'll take a picture so you can see it. So that's the verdict. It does have a gel, but it's not Jello-like, similar to what I get from the slow cooker. So I'm wondering, could I do a second batch and maybe it would also come like this? Maybe it just creates a second batch using the same bones, or is this the best that we can get when we put it under pressure, because maybe some of the gelatin breaks, so to speak, and just can't hold the tight gel like it can in the slow cooker. So it's interesting, but I think this is well worth it. It's relatively quick and it has a lovely flavor. And it does have some gel to it. So I think if you are in a hurry and you don't want to do it in the slow cooker, but now keep in mind, chicken bone broth in the slow cooker is only 6 hours, so you're not making a huge investment. But this is quicker with the 2 hours, and maybe add a little bit of extra time on that for bringing it up to pressure. You can release the pressure at the end quickly and not spend the time waiting for it to come down to pressure. But this is very interesting. So not as gelatinous as the slow cooker, but it is gelatinous. So something to consider when you want to make chicken bone broth in the Instant Pot. You can make it gel. And what are the 3 most important things that I think are to secure that you're at least going to get this much gelatin out of it? Number 1, low pressure for 2 hours. Number 2, not too much water, just enough water to cover. And my 3rd tip, if you can find them, add in a few chicken feet. I'll tell you, I think it's the chicken feet that help to get this at least somewhat gelatinous. If you'd like to learn more about traditional cooking, be sure to subscribe to my channel and then click on this video over here where I show you how to pick out the best bones for making beef bone broth. And I'll see you over there in my Texas Hill Country kitchen. Love and God bless.